My apologies for the delay. We had testimony I needed to give in the Natural Resources Committee, and I appreciate your patience. We have a very important hearing here. This is we've done a series of hearings on the Secret Service, and first and foremost, let me thank the ranking member in the bipartisan way in which we've been moving forward to dealing with this very sensitive and subject. The Secret Service has not been subject to much oversight over the last few decades, but it is a vital part of the mission of the United States Congress, and I think it is a good, healthy thing for all of us to do. First and foremost, I want to congratulate the Secret Service for going through a very tough, rigorous, long campaign season with an immense amount of travel and work. And by any account, Secret Service has had a good year. For everything from the election to the visit from the Pope, there are a host of things that the Secret Service has been called on to do. The United Nations, there's a lot of praise that is due to the men and women who are on the front lines. But we have to deal with some realities of things that we pointed out over the last couple of years. And so this hearing is going to touch on a variety of topics, but first and foremost, I want to start and end by thanking the men and women who are doing this hard work. By our estimation, almost every single agent in the Secret Service has performed overtime for which they have not been compensated. And I want to those of you that are watching to digest this. We know the men and women are committed to this mission, but it is terribly unfair to not receive compensation for doing so. This is not a volunteer job. And when you take yourself and put your life on the line to protect others and protect this nation, when you're away from your family or just away, you should get compensated for that, and we need to address that. We have other problems that need to be fixed. I have, and I know members on both sides of the aisle have questions about the mission of the Secret Service, because one of their prime missions is about cybersecurity. And there are, I think, very legitimate questions. I have deep questions about the protective mission as well as the cyber mission, because it is taking the majority of the time to engage in the cyber mission. We'll talk some more about that. And then one thing that is terribly frustrating and we will not tolerate on the Oversight and Government Reform Committee in Congress, and that is the lack of cooperation in doing our own investigation and working with the Secret Service. You do not get to hide things. That is not an option for the Secret Service. And yet we continue to deal with this, and we've issued subpoenas that have not been responded to. And that is just simply not acceptable. But let's go through some of the details. According to data provided to the committee, 1,077 employees, 90% of whom are agents, worked unpaid overtime hours in support of the presidential election in 2016. Now, there are many law enforcement agencies that enforce caps paid overtime for their hardworking personnel, and I'm not suggesting today that these caps should be totally disregarded or permanently lifted for the Secret Service. You know, we've had a number of hearings. We had a mission panel that was assembled, outside individuals who came together and talked about the improper staffing levels that have led to this. The Secret Service, at its peak, had a staffing level of 7,024 employees. This was in 2011. That number declined every year until the beginning of this year, when the agency had 6,289 employees. The staffing numbers are beginning to improve and are now at 6,507 employees, with 3,300 special agents, 1,400 uniformed division officers, and roughly 1,700 administrative and technical personnel. But by all accounts, you're some 500 to 1,000 people short of where you should be. And you can't just go grab somebody, hand them a gun, and say, hey, go protect the President or go protect the White House. You can't do that. I recognize that it is difficult to vet, train, and get somebody all the way through the process without them dropping out. We want the best of the best. But there is a problem that snowballs in that when you don't have the proper staffing levels, you are leaning on people to go through some tremendous efforts. we have some stories that were provided to us that I want to read some excerpts of. Okay, these are agents serving in various parts of the country, and these are quotes. During this year, I've missed holidays, birthdays, and other life events. Often I've been back off my campaign rotation. I've been grabbed for in-town protective assignments or out-of-town assignments for POTUS or VPOTUS. In total, I've been out of the district and away from home for close to 8 months this year. An agent in Chicago, during this campaign, by the end of the year, I will have exceeded my pay cap by close to $25,000. I've been on almost every campaign rotation and back-to-back travel assignments. The pace has been terrible. I can't even remember the last time I've been in the office for 2 days in a row. This has been ridiculous. It's far worse than 2012 campaign. Thankfully, I'm not married, but if I was, I'd probably be divorced by now. Here's another agent. I've been in the Secret Service for almost 25 years, been involved in every campaign since I've been on the job. We thought the 2000 campaign was the worst, but this makes all the past campaigns pale in comparison. I've been one of the detailed leaders since beginning this campaign, and I'm currently over $60,000 over my pay cap. This is on top of the normal amount of salary I don't receive due to the pay cap, which I expect to lose money on during the non-campaign year. This has been rubbing salt in a wound. We give all we have, our lives, completely disrupted, and we don't see any benefit from the sacrifice. We're losing people. Recruiting has been tough to do, as not many want to do this job, and we're doing nothing to incentivize people to apply or to stay. I have colleagues that were in the same level that have left the job for private sector opportunities. This never happened in the past, and it should be a wake-up call to headquarters in the Hill about the cost and benefit analysis. Making the service has nothing to combat the sentiment that sacrifice is just not worth it. Another agent, my wife keeps asking me, what is the benefit? And I don't have an answer. I have another agent. We are busier than ever. Staffing has become rolling people from one assignment to another with no break. We're all at near our pay cap, which adds to the frustration. I've had things in my house I can't fix. I've had to pay someone else to do. I've had increase in my lawn service contract to do things I would normally do. My children don't see me. Another agent, I'm $25,000 over my pay cap. My average work week is 90 hours. I'm away from my family for weeks at a time, missing out on various functions for school-age children. My wife feels as though she's a single mother and there's no financial benefit. I'm not getting paid. Another agent, every hour of OT worked is not paid. I don't get paid for the work that I do. Another agent, I average 43 days before I get a day off. It goes on and on. My guess is if we sat down with every agent, they got the same story. And that has to change. That's a management problem. That's not an agent in the field's problem. That is a management problem. And one of the things that we see is you can't even tell us how many hours they worked and how much they are doing overtime. Because last time we talked, you didn't even have a system to track this sort of thing. So we have got to solve this. I don't want to create a long-term incentive and say, hey, we're just going to pay this in perpetuity forever. You've got to have the tools to actually solve it. It is dangerous to the president, the vice president, the incoming president, their family, to have somebody who's working a 90-hour week, who's tired, exhausted, and not getting paid. That's not a formula for success, ladies and gentlemen. That has to be solved. The Secret Service has developed and begun implementing a human capital plan that will increase its staffing level to between 8,000 and 9,000 employees by the next presidential election in 2020. So we have 6,500 now, but trying to get to 8,000 to 9,000 people, and we want to hear about how you're going to do this. In the meantime, I do plan to introduce legislation, in fact I did it last night, that will raise the cap for the 2016 election cycle, providing back pay for uncompensated overtime. There is, to the men and women who are watching this, there is relief if we can get this bill passed. And we want to make sure that you get paid for your overtime. I don't know that we can pay for every single hour of every single thing. I don't know that the Secret Service can even track it. But that is what we're trying to do. The Secret Service staffing problems are not caused solely by funding issues. In fact, it should be noted that Congress has enacted more funding than the preceding year every single year in a row with the exception of the year 2006, or since 2006. With one exception, every year, Secret Service budget has gone up, but the staffing levels have gone down. Now, what does that tell you? It tells you that we're not taking care of the of the staffing levels that should be there, and that is on the Secret Service itself. Concerns also remain as Secret Service employees are burdened by their increasing non-essential investigative and cyber-related missions that may distract from the core mission of protecting the President and other protectees. If you average it out, and it's not true for every person, but if you take the 60,000 feet and you average it out, agents spend about 1/3 of their time protecting in protection-related activities during non-presidential election years. Protection-related activities increase to about half their time during presidential election times, which begs the question, could we, with the existing force, if they were just doing the protective mission, which is a massive, important mission to the United States, could they cover all of this without having to have 90-hour to 100-hour work weeks? The answer is yes. We think we could actually get there. If the Secret Service focused all of its resources on the protective mission, then the overtime issue before us may not be there at all. I will continue to work with members on both sides of the aisle to figure out how we actually do this. Casting further doubt on the Secret Service maintaining two separate and distinct missions are issues raised by the Inspector General report, critical of the Secret Service's handling of its own information technology systems. The DHS Inspector General, who's here with us today, recently found that the Secret Service's information technology systems, which contain a wealth of extremely sensitive information, are, quote, vulnerable to unauthorized access and disclosure, end quote. A DHS OIG employee who met with our staff referred to the Secret Service IT systems as the worst in all of Homeland Security, and yet they're supposed to be the ones protecting the nation from everything that we do. And a lot of people do a lot of good work, but that mission is growing and expanding, and it's going global. It's already gone global. It went global a long time ago. The employee indicated the audit should have only taken a few days, but it took months because of how unsecure the systems were and because the Secret Service lacked basic information technology security knowledge. The matters are made worse by the troubling culture of mishandling sensitive information. Additionally, when meeting with the Homeland Security and Secret Service officials, we learned the improper access and disclosure of sensitive information was so commonplace that Secret Service employees didn't even know it was against the rules to do so. This is how arcane the Secret Service process is. Applicants must email sensitive background forms that the Secret Service then prints, stores, and then manually re-inputs them into the system. Do you know how many man-hours are wasted on that, doing that in that system? We have asked the Inspector General to investigate. If the Secret Service is committed to reform, then the agency must also be committed to ensuring top leadership is above reproach and worthy of respect from those that they lead. They are one of the most revered law enforcement agencies on the planet, but after we saw Cartagena, Secret Service employees believed there was a double standard for top leadership, that depending on who you knew and what your position was, you could be promoted despite misconduct. It is imperative that this belief be completely wiped clean in order to truly transform the agency. Currently, the Secret Service is refusing to comply with the duly issued subpoena. The documents in question contain serious misconduct at the senior-most levels of the agency. On May 20th, we requested information related to any past misconduct committed or alleged by senior officials at the GS-15 level or above. On September 2nd, given their non-response, we issued a subpoena for those documents. Today, the production is still not complete. We did receive a trove of documents late last night. We shouldn't have to have a hearing to compel that, but the names have been redacted. The names have been redacted. We can't conduct this. We can't look at do our proper oversight with all the redactions. On this one page here, I can show you, there's 22 redactions on one page of duly issued subpoenaed material. The committee understands there are more than 40 officials of roughly a universe of about 300. There are roughly 40 individuals out of 300 at the GS-15 level or above, including a recently promoted assistant director who have misconduct in their personnel record, either alleged or proven. Based on materials the committee has reviewed, the misconduct in question includes transmitting hardcore pornography on government computers, racially charged messages, visiting strip clubs during working hours using government vehicles, impersonating an FBI or FBI agent or a DEA agent, improper relationships within the workforce, domestic violence, and sexist conduct. The committee has long held that senior leaders must be held to the same standard as the rank-and-file employees. The reason this was highlighted is because when given a survey, anonymous survey, the Secret Service employees told us only 22% of the Secret Service employees believe that senior leaders maintain high standards of honesty and integrity. Think about that. More than 79% of Secret Service employees don't believe that senior leaders act honestly and with integrity. Of course we're going to look into this. That's one of the most stunning numbers we've ever seen pop at us on these surveys. And there's a reason why we do these surveys, is so we can highlight this. But we don't know if you've cleaned this up. We don't know if you've helped solve this. And it's not good enough to just say, oh yeah, we're addressing it, when you won't share the information with the committee. There have been some positive reforms. This committee's bipartisan December 15th report and the December 2014 Blue Ribbon Panel report made extensive recommendations for reform. The Secret Service has taken steps to implement these recommendations and begun to correct its mistakes. But until the Secret Service takes seriously the character of its own senior leadership, it cannot hope to recruit and retain the type of workforce it needs to regain its prestigious position as history has known. The committee is dedicated to reforming the agency to make sure it is as successful as possible and has a zero-fail mission. Again, we appreciate the good work of the men and women who have gone through a very rigorous campaign schedule, but that has not let up. They still have a lot of protection to do, and we thank them for that service. We'll now recognize the ranking member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I'm glad that we are having this hearing. To the men and women of the Secret Service, I too join the chairman in thanking you for all that you do and protecting the President and the other protectees and addressing issues that are very, very difficult when you think about working and not being paid, and at the same time having to go home to a family who has not been able to spend the time that they want to spend with you. And then when you look at your paycheck, you're not even compensated for that time. So I join the chairman in with regard to trying to make sure that we retroactively raise the cap so that Secret Service agents and employees might be properly compensated. Since the beginning of this Congress, I've joined with the chairman to conduct a comprehensive investigation of the Secret Service, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Working together, we issued a bipartisan report last year that documented the cultural problems in the agency and detailed specific incidents of abuse by agents who went astray. But we also did something else extremely important. We documented how staffing levels at the Secret Service dropped off a cliff after significant budget cuts were imposed by sequestration. Let me read to you what our report said, and I quote, "The crisis began after 2011, when the number of employees began to decline sharply, and the decline continued across all categories of employment," end of quote. One of the top causes we identified was the, quote, "significant cuts imposed by the Budget Control Act of 2011, end of quote. That was the bipartisan, unanimous finding of this committee. Through sequestration, Republicans in Congress slashed the budget of the Secret Service, and we're still feeling the consequences of those budget cuts on the men and the women who devote their lives to protecting the President and many other officials. After recognizing this massive problem, we also proposed a bipartisan solution. In our bipartisan report, we made 29 joint recommendations, and one of them read as follows, and I quote, "Congress should ensure that Secret Service has sufficient funds to restore staffing to required levels. The Secret Service should ensure that it has systems in place to achieve these goals." Now, I agree with the chairman. It's one thing to deal with the staffing. It's another thing to make sure that all the support systems are in place. There's been a lot of research done with regard to the Secret Service, a lot of recommendations. But we do have a duty to make sure that the Secret Service is carrying out those recommendations and carrying them out in a timely fashion. Unfortunately, the problem we now face is that some apparently feel that these words mean little, and they will not support additional funding, by the way, for the Secret Service beyond this year to increase staffing or even to keep the staffing they have. As we all know, 2016 has been a year of extraordinary demands and strain on the Secret Service. I thought the chairman did an excellent job of laying out some of those concerns. Recent reports indicate that more than 1,000 Secret Service agents, one-third of the agents, have worked so many hours that they are now maxed out of their overtime and salary and are prohibited by current law from receiving any additional overtime pay. Some agents started working overtime for free as early as June and are exceeding the pay cap by $50,000 or $60,000. But this happens every 4 years, every presidential campaign year, and we know this in advance. Significant hours of overtime are required for the Republican and Democratic national conventions and for around-the-clock protection of the presidential candidates and their families. This year, the Secret Service had to provide security at 2 additional major events, the United Nations General Assembly and the Nuclear Security Summit. As our bipartisan report showed, Secret Service agents have been leaving at historic rates. One senior agent explained how agents had their lives, and I quote, completely disrupted and don't see any benefit from the sacrifice. That's a very sad commentary. As the chairman stated, and when he talked about this person, he also said, we're losing people. Recruiting has been tough to do, as not many want to do this job, and we are doing nothing to incentivize people to apply or stay, end of quote. The men and women of the Secret Service put their lives on the line every day because they love our country. I have talked to Secret Service agents who have said to me that they're willing to take a bullet for the president, willing to take a bullet, then we ought to be able to compensate them. They endure high-stress, 16-hour workdays. They're away from their families for weeks at a time. They miss birthdays, holidays, anniversaries, and time with their children. That's time that they will never be able to recover. They make extreme sacrifices, and they should get paid for the time they work. How in the world can we expect to address the major recruitment and retention challenges at the Secret Service if we are not even paying them for the hours they serve? Raising the salary caps only for 2016 is not enough. This is not a new issue. It comes up every election cycle, and we need a permanent solution. For these reasons, I'm introducing a bill that would create a permanent fix by raising the annual pay cap for every presidential campaign year. And the Secret Service needs to know that in advance. They need to know that we've dealt with this and that they're going to be okay and their families are going to be okay. And if we want to address the issue of morale, I can see no better way to do that. So it is Congress's duty to consistently fund the Secret Service's most mission-critical areas. And we must take action, and we must take action now. Finally, I'm very encouraged that the Secret Service has been making progress implementing our recommendations and those of the Protective Mission Panel. Just this morning, the Department of Homeland Security Inspector General issued a new report commending the Secret Service on the significant strides they have been making. However, the report warns that full implementation will, and I quote, depend heavily on adequate funding and staffing, end of quote. This is a warning for us here in this committee and every member of Congress. I've often said that I want the Secret Service to be the elite among the elite. I want that reputation that the protective armor that they have cannot be pierced, because I think that that in and of itself, that reputation in and of itself, is a deterrent from anybody trying to do something to harm the President or the other officials. And so I urge my Republican colleagues to support my bill and to show the American people that this committee can do more than just talk, that we can act to address the problems swiftly and provide a permanent solution. But more importantly, to say to the Secret Service that we appreciate you and we want to make sure that you receive every penny that you have earned. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. We'll hold the record open for 5 legislative days for any members who would like to submit a written statement. We'll now recognize our panel of witnesses. We're pleased to welcome Mr. Tom Doherty, Chief Strategy Officer at the United States Secret Service; Brigadier General Kevin Nally, retired Chief Information Officer at the United States Secret Service; the Honorable John Roth, Inspector General of the Department of Homeland Security; and the Honorable Patrick O'Carroll, Executive Director of the Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association. Gentlemen, we thank you for being here. Pursuant to committee rules, all witnesses are to be sworn before they testify. If you will please rise and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. You may be seated. Let the record reflect that all witnesses answered in the affirmative. In order to allow time for discussion, we would appreciate it if you would limit your oral testimony to 5 minutes. Your entire written record will be made part of the record. Mr. Doherty, you are now recognized for 5 minutes. And please pull that microphone up close and make sure it's on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman Chaffetz, Ranking Member Cummings. I apologize first, I'm under the burden of a cold, so I apologize for a little bit of the voice issue. But let me start. Good morning, Chairman Chaffetz, Ranking Member Cummings, and distinguished members of the committee. I am proud to appear before you today alongside Secret Service's Chief Information Officer and my colleague, Kevin Nally, the recent acquisitions by the Secret Service, to discuss a broad range of ongoing reforms and betterment of the agency. It is our honor to represent the men and women of the Secret Service at the conclusion of the 2016 presidential campaign. Through the exceptional commitment, dedication, and selfless sacrifices of our workforce, the service has successfully performed one of its most important responsibilities to the nation, that of protecting presidential candidates and presidential and vice presidential nominees. 1 week removed from the general election, we continue to look ahead as we prepare for the presidential, inaugural, and beyond. As with the generations that preceded us, all of us, our more than 6,500 employees demonstrated a level of professionalism and commitment upon which the reputation of our agency has been built historically. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today about these accomplishments as well as the challenges ahead and the efforts that the Director and his staff have undertaken to ensure that the Secret Service is an agency that does continuously improve. The agency began preparation and training for candidate operations in the summer of 2015. A long time ago now, it seems, at the direction of the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, and after consultation with the Congressional Advisory Committee, initiated protection of candidates in November of 2015. As part of our campaign efforts, we also provided security for 3 presidential debates, as well as 1 vice presidential debate. In the course of this election year, the service coordinated security for over 2,500 candidate trips, during which approximately 4 million people went through magnetometer screening in order to protect the American political process. Protection is a collaborative effort, and we are fortunate to have the support of a number of partners over the past year, particularly. We work with our DHS colleagues at Homeland Security Investigations, that's HSI, Transportation Security Administration, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, as well as state and local public safety agencies throughout the country to ensure protection for these candidates, and we thank them for their critical support. We could not do our job without state and local law enforcement. Amidst candidate operations, the agency coordinated 5 national special security events over this particular year. And then, of course, the Pope just prior to that time as well. It's 6. While Federal, state, and local partners from across the government supported these NSSCs as envisioned in presidential directives, I am proud to say that these events also demonstrated a tremendous unity of effort or unity of government effort within the Department. These NSSCs included the State of the Union, the 2016 Nuclear Summit, Nuclear Security Summit, the Republican and Democratic National Conventions, and, of course, the 71st United Nations General Assembly in New York. Beyond the operational achievements of the past year and a half, Director Clancy has rebuilt the Secret Service's command structure and implemented policies to increase transparency and communication between senior leaders, supervisors, and the rank and file across our agency. Many of these changes were recommendations made by the Independent Protective Mission Panel, as well as this committee. The work of the PMP led the Secret Service to examine how we lead the organization, how we train for and conduct operations, and how we engage with every member of the workforce. 1 year after the PMP issued this report, the Secret Service invited the panel members from the PMP back to our headquarters to meet with Director Clancy to discuss the progress we had made and to get their input genuinely to ensure that our actions and our intended direction were consistent with the intent of their recommendations. Their positive response to our progress was encouraging. Our job is not finished, though, of course, with that. The DHS Office of Inspector General recently reviewed the Secret Service's progress in implementing the recommendations of the PMP. In its report, the OIG stated, the Secret Service has clearly taken the PMP's recommendations seriously, which it has demonstrated by making a number of significant changes. The DHS OIG went on to note that fully addressing some of the PMP recommendations will take considerable time. It is a sustained effort, funding, and stakeholder support, your support. We appreciate the OIG's assessment and concur with the 5 recommendations that he has put forward to us. In addition to Mr. Roth's report, we have actively sought assessments and feedback from external sources. Among them, most recently, as published today, the National Academy of Public Administration, which helped us identify ways to build and complete additional actions related to both the PMP and also the Hoger report. The Secret Service is committed to a sustained long-term effort of continual improvement. During our work to address the PMP recommendations, we have addressed concerns raised in the committee's report, which include changes in Secret Service leadership and the structure of our organization, fundamentally, profoundly, hiring and retaining personnel, and the budgeting of our own mission needs to sustain the operations based on what it costs. With the 2016 presidential campaign behind us, our employees continue to meet the significant requirements of the mission in the face of our ever-changing threat environment. Under Director Clancy's leadership, we will continue to support all of our employees as we build our hiring and retention initiatives, there are many, and fight to provide them with the commensurate compensation for the long hours that they work on behalf of the American people. We've made tremendous strides in fulfilling these. We bring the same focus to the recommendations made by this committee. On behalf of Director Clancy and his executive staff, I would like to thank the men and women of the Secret Service for their hard work and sacrifices this entire year. The agency has a proud tradition of operational excellence and professionalism. I know the Director is deeply committed to the workforce and will continue to do everything he can. Chairman Chaffetz, Ranking Member Cummings, members of the committee, that concludes my testimony, and I do welcome your questions going forward.
Thank you. Mr. Nally. Mr. Nally, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this opportunity. I actually do not have a written statement, but I would like to caveat that say the state of IT within the Secret Service is taken very seriously by the Director, his staff, and the entire Secret Service. For the record, I was not with the service when this information happened in the OIG report. However, I'd be happy to talk to you about what I've done with Mr. Clancy's support to fix what is in the OIG report. We've made significant organizational improvements in late December 2015, and the successes during each National Special Security event are a testimony to mission accomplishment, our current leadership in place, and our continual progress for system security and a continued focus on supporting a mobile workforce. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. The Inspector General, Mr. Roth, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Chaffetz, Ranking Member Cummings, and members of the committee, thank you for inviting me here today to testify. The Secret Service has taken action to address the concerns and challenges identified by our office, the Protective Mission Panel, and this committee. Although we have seen encouraging progress, many of the implemented changes will require long-term commitment and planning. We will continue to monitor the Secret Service's progress in implementing our recommendations and that of the PMP over time. In our most recent report, released today, we looked at the Secret Service's progress in meeting the Protective Mission Panel's 19 recommendations that it made in December 2014. We found that the Secret Service has clearly taken the panel's report seriously, and Director Clancy has shown a strong commitment to fully implementing the panel's recommendations. For example, one of the panel's major findings was that the Secret Service had never developed a budget process that articulated its mission or a corresponding staffing and budget plan to meet its needs. This meant, as its operational tempo has increased, the Secret Service often fixed short-term problems at the expense of long-term ones, such as deferring technology refreshes to pay for operational travel or paying large amounts of overtime rather than fixing the hiring process. To cure this, the Secret Service has for the first time developed a mission-based budget for fiscal 2018, which should address many of the causes of equipment and personnel shortfalls. The Secret Service has also taken actions or plans to act on the panel's recommendations related to staffing, training, technology, leadership, and organization. Of note, they have hired civilian professionals for many of the mission support functions, including the CFO, the CIO, the Chief Operating Officer, and the strategic planning and technical development functions. However, again, fully implementing changes and resolving the underlying issues will take a multi-year commitment and depend heavily on adequate funding and staffing. And unfortunately, some of the initiated or proposed actions have not yet resulted in the desired outcomes. The Secret Service has increased hiring, but still struggles with staff retention. For example, they hired 402 special agents between October 2014 and June 2016, but lost 420 special agents through attrition for a net loss of approximately 18 special agents. During the same period, they hired 342 Uniform Division officers, but lost 312 through attrition, again, gaining only 30 officers during that time period. Although training has been enhanced, it continues to be hindered by low staffing levels and high operational demands on the workforce. The Secret Service continues to be challenged by significant hiring delays. A lack of dedicated human resources staff lengthens the hiring process. For example, special agents in field offices conduct polygraph examinations and background investigations as collateral duties, but their primary duties of investigation and protection, of course, take precedence. Additionally, low staffing levels of human resources personnel have slowed the process. At the end of 2015, for example, almost a third of human resource positions went vacant in the Secret Service. Finally, we took a closer look at the state of the Secret Service's IT program in light of the episode in which agents improperly accessed and distributed Chairman Chaffetz's personal information contained on the Secret Service mainframe known as MCI. We found that the data that was contained within the mainframe was migrated to 5 different data systems. Unfortunately, in a report that we released several weeks ago, none of those systems have adequate protections in place to prevent similar breaches from happening. We found major IT systems running without an authority to operate, which is a certification approved by the DHS CIO that effective controls are in place to protect the information on the systems. Additionally, we found inadequate, incomplete, or missing system security plans, inadequate controls on who has access to the systems, and poor audit controls, which hinders the Secret Service's ability to detect unusual user activities and provide the appropriate response to potential or actual security risks. Moreover, we found that each of these systems had poor privacy protections and inadequate record retention practices. In fact, we found employment applications that were more than 5 years old, including records up to 14 years old. We found Chairman Chaffetz's 2003 application for employment, for example, and the corresponding personal information still remaining within 2 of Secret Service's systems and therefore susceptible to unauthorized access. After we brought this to the Secret Service's attention, they deleted that record in January 2016. However, the Secret Service could not provide assurance that other applicants' records and corresponding personal information had been properly expunged from their systems. We determined that the cause of these issues was that IT management had not been a priority historically. We found that the responsibility for the IT function had been unwisely split into 2 parts, and that the CIO at the time did not have sufficient authority over the data systems, and the Secret Service suffered from significant turnover and staff vacancies. We believe that the Secret Service is moving to correct these deficiencies and will, of course, monitor that progress. This concludes my testimony. I will be happy to answer questions that the committee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. We'll now recognize Mr. O'Carroll for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Chairman Chaffetz, Ranking Member Cummings, and members of the committee. As the Chairman noted in his opening, one of our Secret Service members told us that he participated in every campaign rotation this year. In May, he approached the pay cap. At year-end, he will have exceeded the pay cap by around $30,000. He has missed holidays, birthdays, and other life events. He has been away from home for almost 8 months, and while off campaign rotations, he is often away participating on presidential and vice presidential protective assignments. Another member told us that he worked more overtime hours in April and September than regular work hours. Lastly, an agent told us that if the candidate wins, he will approach being $40,000 over the cap. His average work week is 90 hours, he is away from his family for weeks at a time, and misses out on various functions of his school-aged children. His wife feels as though she is a single mother, and there is no financial benefit to his being away. The burden is actually greater since they have to spend more money on child care since he can't help out. On behalf of the membership of the Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association, thank you for the opportunity to appear here before you today. FLEOA is the largest nonpartisan, nonprofit professional association exclusively representing more than 26,000 active and retired Federal law enforcement officers across 65 different agencies. I would like to discuss in my testimony today the challenge faced by U.S. Secret Service special agents who have worked hundreds of hours of uncompensated overtime during the course of the 2016 campaign season. This is an issue with which I am very familiar, having served as a special agent on presidential candidate details, as well as permanent assignments on both the President and Vice Presidential Protective Divisions over my 24-year career in Secret Service. The 2016 presidential campaign has proven to be one which by most measures was unprecedented. Over the course of the past year, many Secret Service agents have participated in approximately 7,000 protective stops, spent over 200 nights on the road, worked 16 or more hours per day, and likely did not spend more than one night in the same bed. Without them, however, this sacred process we go through every 4 years may not happen safely. During this 1 year, exceptional sacrifices of family, friends, and life are required as special agents are forced to work inordinate amounts of overtime under an operational tempo that is not unlike a military deployment. Yet despite the unusual demands placed upon agents this campaign season, many of them will not receive full compensation for the long hours that they have worked. It is not free money or a bonus, but money earned logging 16-hour days for weeks on end, with back-to-back rotations between campaign travel and investigative details. They have lost and will continue to lose a significant amount of overtime compensation this year because their pay cannot exceed the pay for a GS-15 Step 10. The current situation has become not just a recruitment and retention issue, but a fundamental matter of fairness to those who willingly place themselves in harm's way for long hours spent carrying out their sworn duty to protect and serve. Fortunately, a solution that will ensure compensation for these and other Secret Service agents affected by the pay cap this year is in sight. Thanks to the efforts of this committee and your colleagues on the Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee, and both the House and Senate Appropriations Committees, Congress is close to finalizing language that will provide the USSS with a temporary waiver of the pay cap. Language has been included in both the House and Senate versions of fiscal year 2017 Homeland Security Appropriations Act to waive the pay cap up to level 3 of the executive schedule for either 2016 or for both 2016 and 2020. It is also proposed to fund at level 2, and FLEOA fully supports the ES2 level, since this will certainly provide some measure of the relief of the affected agents. So while FLEOA greatly appreciates your efforts, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Cummings, we would also like to stress the importance of working together to find a permanent solution to this pay cap issue. Such a solution could include granting the Director of the Secret Service the authority to waive the application of the pay cap as necessary during a calendar year to meet the demands of the agency's protective functions. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, I would like to thank you and Ranking Member Cummings again for working with us to address this important issue. As a nation, we expect a lot from the small group of patriotic men and women of the USSS who voluntarily choose to stand between anarchy and order to ensure the leaders of our Republic are able to perform their jobs free from threats or the fear of assault. At its core, it is a fundamental matter of fairness to ensure that these individuals are fully compensated for the duties they perform on a daily basis, and we greatly appreciate your efforts to do just that. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear today, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. We'll now recognize the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Duncan, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Doherty, your agency reported a total staff of 6,507 at the end of fiscal year 2016. That was up from 6,289 at the beginning of the fiscal year. So there's actually been an increase in employment over the past fiscal year. But I'm told that the service also uses contract employees, but the staff doesn't seem to know exactly how many contract employees you have. So can you give me some rough idea about how much work is being done with contract employees, and has that number also gone up in this past fiscal year?
Thank you, Mr. Duncan, for that question. So I can go right to the heart of it, and that is that we're doing everything we can in which to up the tempo for hiring. And in particular, we have, in fact, added substantial numbers of contractors, both on the talent acquisition division group, which basically hires people at the beginning of the process. That's roughly about 24 individuals, if I recall correctly the number, and that's basically on a two-time basis, sort of in terms of sort of schedules. And in addition, on the security side, we've actually added substantially another 20-plus contractors to sort of upgrade the tempo. That reflects several man-hours of effort for contractor support in which to sort of up the tempo on that. I might add to that, then, that, in fiscal year 16, we literally hired 327 special agents, 309 uniformed division officers, and 194 professional people. So 830 individuals in 1 year. If we continue to go forward on the pace that we're doing, we will hire 1,666 individuals over the next 2 fiscal years, this fiscal year and next. We are, in fact, ramping up and really trying to increase the pace. And that effectively is helping.
1,600 over and above the 6,500 plus that you have now.
That adds to the ultimate bottom line numbers, of course.
Okay.
You always have to factor attrition into that, and that is always an issue for us. But ultimately, we are attempting to try to really increase the pace.
All right, let me ask you this. The committee issued this report that's already been mentioned at the end of last year, and it says the Secret Service has failed to make clear that protection is its ultimate priority. And I understand that ordinarily about a third of the time is being spent on protection-related activities, but that ramped up to 44% during the election. But we've seen many hateful, very hateful demonstrations against the President-elect Trump just in the last few days, several places around the country. What do you think that are you going to ramp up your protection are you going to give President-elect Trump more protection than you would ordinarily do? Or what's your thoughts on that?
Well, first, of course, protection is the priority mission of the United States Secret Service. I don't think there's any doubt about it. Director Clancy has said that. Apologize. That protection is the priority mission of the Secret Service. Director Clancy has said that. With respect to what the inaugural and all the other things, procedures or methods related to protecting the new administration, obviously we will continue to use the model that's been very successful at going forward to providing protection to the President. And I think the same thing sort of applies to this President-elect as it does for the previous President.
The committee has a report that says the IT systems at the Secret Service are described as the worst at DHS, and that managers, quote, managers cannot even explain basic IT principles, and that department officials have said that there's a culture of mishandling of secure information. And of course, we have that report of the contract advance person at the White House that whose Gmail account was hacked with all sorts of secure information. What's the latest on that? Do you think do you still believe that that's accurate, that the IT systems at the Secret Service are the worst in the whole department?
So let's just answer that first for my colleague in the sense of that, I mean, introduce Kevin Nally.
Right.
One of the principal structurally important, profound things that we did in the Secret Service, and I think this is an important decision made by Director Clancy, is to bring in a professional who was not an agent to effectively run our IT systems in the Secret Service. Mr. Nally can actually clearly address the issues regarding the technology part of this.
Thank you, sir. I'll break it up in a couple parts. First, one, is it a cultural issue? No, it's not a cultural issue. The individuals that did get out of place, do wrong things, is roughly 0.7% of the population of the Secret Service, so it's not a cultural thing. We now have procedures in place to check for that. We have people understand the ramifications of their actions in that regard, and plus we have training and education on PII and sensitive types of information. Number two is, in the OIG report dated October 7th, 2016, released October 14th, 2016, 7 of those recommendations are mine. 6 of those have been closed. 6 of them. 6 of them were closed prior to the report being released. The one that's going to be continual ongoing is a continual type of education and training for my information system security officers, cybersecurity professionals, and those that have access to the network in terms of cybersecurity awareness, phishing type drills, et cetera, et cetera. When I arrived here in November 16, 2015, I saw a need for a complete reorganization of the Information Resources Management Division that was under another assistant director to the Office of the CIO. And I want to stress, too, that this is how Mr. Clancy sees IT. He knows it's very, very important to the Secret Service mission, and I have had his full support in this. I now have a complete accounting of all IT spending in the Secret Service. I'm the only CIO in the Secret Service, and I'm the only designated approving authority for those systems that we operate in the Secret Service. And all this has been rectified. And again, I'm the only CIO, I'm the only DAA, and I have direct oversight on all IT spending. Additionally, 3 in the OIG report dated October 7, 2016, 3 of the 4 systems in that report now have ATOs. The 4th one is human capital, which I gave a target date of December 31, 2016, and we're on track to meet that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We'll now recognize the gentlewoman from the District of Columbia, Ms. Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate that you've held this hearing. It comes at a timely moment. I want to say to our witnesses how much we appreciate your service to our country. You've come before us when we've had a number of complaints. I don't think that is what this hearing is about today. And I must say I do not envy you with your mission in the coming months. I have never seen Americans reply or respond to an election by going in huge numbers to the streets simply to protest the new president even before he has done anything. This is a president and others who have to be protected by you. So the notion of a honeymoon is out of the window. Then you have the upcoming inauguration, and here in the district, we are awaiting that. And of course, there are people who promise to come in huge numbers for that event. There was concern about your mission when we had our first African-American president. Some have expressed even greater concern today, given the divisions in the country. I am very pleased that this committee issued a bipartisan report that used very strong language, particularly strong language when it comes to staffing, but it was bipartisan language in December of last year, where the committee, this committee, found, and here I am quoting, a staffing crisis that poses perhaps the greatest threat to the agency. Now that, of course, was before all of what I have just described. This committee found that the Secret Service had fewer employees than at any time over the past decade, and we found an 8% decline in special agents over a 5-year period. Then in August, this committee sent a letter to you, to the Secret Service, requesting quarterly staffing updates, and last week you responded. Mr. Doherty, if I understand your response, there was a net increase of 84 special agents during FY 2016. That's about a 3% increase. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. Generally, that's the number, roughly.
Now, that certainly is important to note. The number is still significantly below the number of special agents before the so-called sequester. Isn't that correct?
The series of events that occurred for the service from 2011 on really contributed significantly to the service effectively sort of bleeding off individuals.
Series of events, by which you mean what?
What I say is that we had a funding deficit already going into 2012,
Yes,
2013.
then the sequester and other.
And it was exacerbated by a variety of other events. It was
But here's my concern.
a perfect storm.
It looks like you did, in fact, hire a number of agents. The figure I have is 281 special agents in 2016, and yet there was only a net increase of 84. What happened to the nearly 200 agents? I'm concerned with your hiring them, you're not keeping them, or somebody's leaving. Who's leaving and why?
So we're hiring at historic rates, and we also have an attrition issue, which we're attempting to try to address as well. And so it's
And you ascribe that attrition issue to what? And are they older agents, people ready to retire? Are they the new agents who are coming in who are not retained? Who are they?
It's a series of issues, Congresswoman Norton. You go through waves where you hire at certain times at high levels, and those people will effectively leave at generally the same time. But we also, too, just simply have a really tough mission, and ultimately we're.
Is it what Mr. O'Carroll spoke of, the working conditions that have developed? If there are too few agents, some agents are doing 2 or 3 jobs rather than 1 job?
Absolutely. That's one of the many issues that we are addressing. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentlewoman. Now recognize the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Gowdy, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. O'Carroll, I don't know if this is a memo or if this was a press release from FLEOA. I'm going to read part of it, and then that'll give us some context to have a conversation. Unfortunately, we have seen some in Congress act as if they were part of the media. I want to just stop right there and say of all the criticisms that members of Congress have gotten in the 6 years I've been here, that one hurts the most. Instead of introducing bills that could help our agency, they'd rather go for the 30-second soundbite that tarnishes the reputation of the agency and work ethic of its personnel. This is unfortunate, as we do have many allies in Congress and appreciate the work of the Secret Service, its personnel, and want to help, but they are overshadowed by the screaming minority who might not even be able to pass the test for our job. Now, I consider myself to be one of your allies, so I don't think you have a better friend in Congress than the former prosecutors. But I am wondering what members of Congress you were referring to that would rather pursue a 30-second soundbite than help the agency.
Well, Representative Gowdy, I guess first and foremost, that isn't my quote. It was a quote of a representative from the Secret Service who is a member of my association, and it came out on our letterhead. So yes, our concern on this thing is and we've been dealing with your committee, in fact with you, with the chairman, and expressing our concerns that this is a budget issue that needs to be going from the authorizers to the appropriators and asking the appropriators to, to add the money that will help with the pay cap on this thing. And,
Well,
and I
see
gotta
there,
admit, sir,
you just made your case without talking about any member of Congress who is more interested in a 30-second soundbite than they are helping the agency. You just did it, which makes me wonder why this memo didn't do it. Are there members in particular? I actually don't think I've ever been on television talking about the Secret Service, so I don't think you're talking about me. Who are you talking about?
in this case, as I said, Mr. Gowdy, I didn't write that one, so I'm not too sure specifically which
But it
member
came
was
out
being
on
talked about.
FLIOA letterhead,
Yes, sir.
right?
Yep.
And I'm assuming you don't let people send things out on your letterhead that don't at least have some imprimatur of your support.
Well, Mr. Gowdy, what I can do on that one is I can go back to the author of it and find out which member he was speaking about specifically. But I got to tell you, this is a can that's been kicked down the road for years and years in terms of this overtime issue.
Right, I get that.
There's a lot to blame.
But because I am an ally, sometimes allies also need to offer some words of correction. That paragraph ended by saying, overshadowed by the screaming minority who might not even be able to pass the test for our job. Can you see how that might have gotten my attention, the way that that would be phrased, might not be able to pass the test for our job? That's a curious line to put in a memo, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Except it's not curious. You and I know exactly what that author was talking about, don't we?
I could guess at it, yes.
Guess.
It'd be some members of this committee.
Such as whom?
I have no idea.
How about the one whose personnel file was accessed? Could it be that one?
I would say that there hasn't been very good treatment of that application over the years, which is one of the reasons why we're here, and maybe that was a subliminal reference to it. I don't know.
Well, it's
I didn't
actually
write
not
it.
subliminal. It could not be more clear. There's nothing subliminal about it. It just flat out says who could not pass our test for our job.
And it was a general statement on it, not specific, sir.
Well, Mr. O'Carroll, you can't run a license tag because you happen to think the driver is cute. You can't run an NCIC background check because your kids might be hanging out with some bad characters. And you can't access the personnel files of members of Congress that you happen to not like at that particular point. You would agree with me there, wouldn't you?
Reprehensible, and I agree with you.
All right, well, it's reprehensible. Mr. Inspector General, what happened to him?
My understanding is that there was discipline that was imposed by the department. I don't have those details because I was not involved in the discipline process.
Well, when you say discipline, give me the range of discipline that could be possible.
Well, I think the range of discipline could be anywhere from termination.
Was anybody terminated?
My understanding is no.
Was anybody given time off?
My understanding was, yes. people
with or
were
without pay?
given time off without pay that was not suspended. There was a number of individuals who were received time off, and that was suspended, but there were others who actually did get time off.
How pervasive was the breach?
Well, our report said that it was approximately 40-some people, only of which 3 had, or 4, I can't remember off the top of my head.
Is there any ambiguity on whether or not it's a good idea to access anyone, member of Congress or otherwise's application or personnel file to use for retributive purposes?
No.
Is there any ambiguity about whether or not that's a good idea?
It is not.
Can you let me know what discipline was meted out? There's no one in Congress that holds law enforcement in higher esteem than I do. No one. But we choose to go into that line of work, and the rules apply even to us. And I think accessing programs that the public does not have access to try to embarrass your critics, to use Mr. O'Carroll's word, is reprehensible. So I'd like to know what punishment was meted out.
Very well, thank you.
With that, I would yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Well, I recognize the ranking member, Mr. Cummings.
I want to really kind of get down to the bottom of this, and I think Ms. Norton was headed in the right direction. If we are hiring agents and they're leaving almost as fast as we're hiring them, gentlemen, we need to figure out why we're losing so many so quickly, and whether that has anything to do, Mr. Roth, with the infrastructure inside the Secret Service. But before I get to that, I want to ask you, Mr. Doherty, what are you all telling the agents about their salaries, and how do you keep their morale? What do you say to them? Did you say that you were coming up here with the urgency of now to try to help them get adequate pay? I'm just curious.
I think that's one of the things, Mr. Cummings, that we are attempting to try to do differently and better, is simply communicate to the populations in a different way. Director Clancy sends out videos to the population all the time about what we're trying to do to change the overall culture and the overall.
Did you say to them that you're trying? Because I got to tell you, going back to some of the things Mr. Gowdy said, you've got a lot of allies up here. So we're trying to figure out. So do you tell them you're going to go and try to fight to make sure they get their overtime?
I think they're seeing that. I think they're sensing that. I think that we are telling them that there's a committed leadership on the part of the Secret Service to try and sort of change many of these different things. Pay is a big part of it. Obviously, there's a lot of other things too that go to sort of quality of life. We did a work-life assessment with that third party as well to basically sort of open up ourselves, try and get an idea as to how to be able to approach those things. So structurally, there's so many changes taking place in the Secret Service right now. I feel confident and enthusiastic about a lot of the things that are going on. I'm also enthusiastic about the fact that we're talking about the proposed legislation, which I think does in fact address a very important issue that's been a chronic one and a recurring one for the Secret Service over the years.
Well, I don't, Mr. Roth, you got to help me on this one. I swear that I don't want to be going in circles on this. And, you know, I looked at some of the things that you've said, and you said it several times in your testimony. You talk about requiring multi-year commitment and depend heavily on adequate funding and staffing. There's two parts to that. So can you tell us what we need to do, first of all, to help the Secret Service not have this bucket that is as fast as we pour agents in, we lose them out? I mean, I think that's what we got to get. That's the bottom line. And I think that's where the chairman is. We're trying to figure out how do we be most effective and efficient. So can you help us? I mean, tell us what they are doing wrong. Tell us if they should be moving faster. This long-term commitment, what does that mean? You know, we need to know, because I think that would help guide us as to what we do.
I mean, these are systemic problems that have accumulated over years. So, for example, with the hiring situation, for example, you have Secret Service agents who do protection and do investigations, but also as a collateral duty, they have to do the background investigations of applicants that are coming in. They have to do the polygraph investigations of the folks that are coming in. That is a hugely inefficient process. It creates a bottleneck for the Secret Service. So the time to hire numbers for the Secret Service are very, very long. For a special agent, it's often in excess of a year. To be able to sort of modernize their systems, their personnel systems, having a third of their HR personnel slots vacant. In other words, they simply don't have the personnel to be able to hire at the kind of tempo that
And why? Let's stop right there.
Sure.
Why is that? Because that's very significant. If you don't have the hiring component, and you got missing people there, vacancies there, so what's stopping them from having those people? Is this a thing of musical chairs with regard to the budget, or what? I mean, what's...
I think it's a chicken and egg problem because they don't have enough personnel to sort of ramp up the kinds of efforts that they need to get more personnel. There are things that they are doing, for example, with their IT system for how it is that they process applications. They're having to modernize that. As the chairman talked about before, right now they have a fairly antiquated system where people email PDF copies of their background investigation form, which then gets printed out, physically reviewed, and then re-entered in. There's just enormous inefficiencies in the system that have grown up over time. So I think what the Secret Service is attempting to do is professionalize what it is that they do. But, for example, changing an IT system within the government takes years, and there's no really getting around that. By the time you get your requirements together, by the time you do the acquisition, by the time you develop the process that you need, it will be years from now before they will have an effective IT system.
The problem is that in the meantime, as Ms. Norton said so eloquently, we have a president-elect who we want to, I mean, he's coming under a lot of, I know that's going to put a lot of pressure on the Secret Service because you see what's happening in the streets. We want to make sure that he is properly protected. So all the time that you're talking about it's going to take, how do we speed that process up and not subject him and his family and others to less than adequate protection, and at the same time, properly compensate the men and women of the Secret Service, and so that we don't have a further erosion of morale. I mean, I think that those are the questions that are the bottom line and should be the bottom line for this entire hearing. So, and then I'm almost finished, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Nally, Mr. Roth, you can keep your mic on. Keep your mic on. Mr. Nally, you've heard what Mr. Roth said and Mr. Doherty. How do we do that? Again, we're losing people. He just said that we've got some things that we need to fix. Talk about the HR department. We want to know what you're going to do to make the elite, help make the elite, and be able to staff up, because we can pass all the money that's out here. But if we don't have the mechanisms to hire the people, and morale is being damaged, I mean, and you know that's a problem. So help me, talk to me.
Ranking Member, if I can add to that, I think that we have in fact put most of the mechanisms, refreshed, modernized mechanisms. Let me sort of go through a couple of them. First of all, we changed our hiring system completely from 2013 through 2014 and 15 now. It's a completely different hiring system right now. We have ELACs, basically where we go and have people come to a single place. We have now committed to, the Director's committed to hiring a new professional civilian Chief Human Capital Officer. We completely restructured our entire hiring process and also our human capital structure, and effectively now have a national recruitment strategy. Now, so I'd say that the numbers that I gave you, over the next 2 years, we will have hired a third of our entire agency over again. It's not about the numbers. We are doing everything we can to bring in people. Now, the campaign will subside. We will get back to sort of a cadence where I think people start to kind of settle, And I think that retention levels that we're experiencing right now, which are historic, are going to sort of calm down. We do believe that we're going to get to a place where next year we're going to be at 6,805 individuals, and then the next year, finally, additional individuals. We are moving towards that. And remember, 6,805 is substantially over where we've been, and it's moving rapidly towards the direction of 7,025, where we were in 2012.
Mr. Roth, I just want, my time has expired, but I'm wondering, can you comment on what he just said?
Well, I certainly think that the building blocks are in place, that they have professionalized their staff. For example, a CFO who is a professional CFO, a CIO, a chief operating officer, now a chief human capital officer. All those were recommendations of the PMP that they thought were necessary to get the basic building blocks of management fundamentals down, as opposed to having agents come through on 3-year rotations to try to be the CIO. But time is going to tell whether or not this is sufficient. Right now they are caught, I think, in a vicious cycle. That is, with the increased tempo means that there's going to be increased attrition, and then increased attrition means that the work tempo for everybody else who's left increases. So perhaps Mr. Doherty's right that they will be able to break that cycle at the conclusion of this election events. And we will simply monitor it and see.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Now I recognize the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Meadows, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank each of you for your testimony. And I want to start off by saying that I've enjoyed a good relationship with Director Clancy and his leadership. I wear a law enforcement pin almost every day that I'm here or in the district. It is my heart and my passion. I'm frustrated a little bit because of what I hear today. Mr. Doherty, just to be frank, you refer to your agents as a population. They're not a population, they're people. They're families. And I've had the pleasure of being able to work alongside them in North Carolina, where we got to see a lot of the people that have been away from their families for a very long time, not just with the Secret Service, but with the Department of Homeland Security as well. And so when we look at the strains, I'm all about making sure that they get compensated properly and that we don't have this systemic problem. But here's my concern, Mr. Doherty. I continue to hear from agents who say that the systemic problem within the service is not about the systems, it's not about the computer systems, it's about the 8th floor. It's about the management and the fact that what we do is we continue to force people to relocate in the middle of their term at 14 or 15 years with the service. We continue to upend them. And when are we going to fix that problem? Because you talk about bad morale. You move somebody from California to Washington, D.C. because it's the way that you do business. It is time, and your counselor there behind you knows that this is not our first rodeo together. It is critical that we handle this problem because you're going to continue to have retention problems until you fix the overall feeling within the service that the people just a few blocks from here care about them and their families. So what's your plan for that?
Well, first of all, thank you, Congressman Meadows, for the comment about law enforcement. I do very much appreciate that. And I didn't mean to convey necessarily population versus people. They are ultimately, they're individuals, they're people, and we need to care about each and every one of them and take care of each of them, and to effectively trust them and feel pride in them. I think that this is the one area that I think that if we're really doing well, I think it's this area. We have unloaded ourselves in terms of really asking for people outside the agency to come in and focus group our people and ask them the very issues that you're raising. How do you feel about special agents?
So what have you changed? I've only got 5 minutes. So based on that input, what have you changed? Because I haven't seen a whole lot of change. And getting back to what General Nally said, I believe that the vast majority, if not almost all of our agents, there's not a cultural aspect of poor performance. But I do believe that there is a cultural problem with regards to the way that the service looks at who gets hired, when they get hired. Even the new agents who would gladly come to Washington, D.C., you send them somewhere else and then you bring them back midstream as if that's some kind of wonderful way to do the project. Have you addressed that, yes or no?
Yes, sir, I believe we have. Let me just raise this a couple of points here.
So when I start getting phone calls, and they call me directly, when I start getting phone calls, I'm not going to have to come back and ask you to clarify your sworn testimony today. You've addressed that.
They asked us to change the Special Agent Relocation Committee. We did that. They asked us to change the way that there's requests basically for exceptional circumstances. We changed that. They asked us for a new special agent promotion process. We changed that. They asked us for a new special agent career progress or career.
So why do you have the retention problem then?
I think basically there's.
Because it isn't money.
I think.
I can tell you.
It is.
Money is a motivator for 6 weeks. Now, getting them properly paid and overtime, that is an issue. But the other issue that's systemically within the service has nothing to do with the amount of money. It has to do with the culture that is there. And I've heard from too many agents to know that that's not the case.
Well, I think compensation is a big part because it's when you're crushing people and you're asking them to go.
Well, you've got people behind you that are disagreeing with you right now. I watch people and they're disagreeing. They're shaking their head no. They would agree with my statement that it has some to do with money, but a whole lot to do with the culture.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I think it has something to do with money. I think it has to do with a lot more than that. I think there's a lot of things that we are attempting to try and move and change. So all of the different things that came up in the Eagle Hill, for example, work-life process that basically that they said ask us to do, we are implementing. We're effectively going forward and doing those things. We just put our work-life study on our intranet site. It's there for our people to see. What did they recommend? What are we moving forward on? It's many things. It's multiple things. So I do think that there is, in fact, progress made. We're hoping that we see the effects of that progress.
Well, this committee wants to hear from those agents that are being affected for recommendations so that we can follow up with you. I appreciate the chair holding this hearing. I'll yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Now recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Lynch, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the ranking member. I want to thank the panelists, Mr. Doherty, Mr. Nally, Mr. Roth, Mr. O'Carroll. I appreciate the job you're all doing. I have a couple of slides here. I just want you to take a look at it, if you would. Could we put up the one regarding total full-time employees at Secret Service? Well, let me just explain. I'll wait for the slide. While we're waiting for them, let me just say, you know, we've been looking at a couple of the incidents around the White House that have occurred over the last couple of years, last few years. You know, people breaching the perimeter. One fellow running through the White House down into the green room. We've had situations with armed personnel getting on the elevator with the President. A bunch of embarrassing moments, and I think that the pressure on our Secret Service employees is under this new threat environment, as Mr. Doherty has explained, is only getting worse with the number of people we are. Okay, total full-time employees, if you can look at that, in 2006, we seem to be on a trend line of addressing this new threat environment. We went from about 6,500 to about 7,000 employees over 5 years. But that peak of 7,024 employees, that's when we came in with the Budget Control Act in 2011. And then you see a precipitous decline in full-time personnel, down to about 6,300. So we've got less now at Secret Service than we had back in 2006. And as you have explained in your testimony, the threat environment is getting worse. Can we put up the other one on special agents? Here's special agents. Okay, so we were trying to ramp up because of the extreme threat environment. We were trying to ramp up over 2006 to about 2011. We went from about 3,200, almost 3,300, to about 3,500. And then, again, the Budget Control Act comes into play, and now we've got less than we had in 2006, even though the demands on our folks are worse, especially our special agents. Two of the areas where I think are very important, one is processing our employees, our special agents and Secret Service personnel, and also training them. I think, that's something that, Mr. Doherty, you've talked about in the past, and Mr. Roth, you've highlighted that as well, and Mr. O'Carroll, you've agreed as well. We want a highly professional, capable, well-paid, and the pay needs to be better. Not only shouldn't we be, putting a Band-Aid on for 1 year, an election year, we got to look at the whole structure here. We got to pay our agents better. We're asking a lot of them, and we ought to try to establish a pay level that'll attract the best and brightest, and also the academy type, the professionalism and excellence that we demand from our Secret Service personnel. We have to have commensurate training and pay for them. Mr. Roth, is there any special change that we could make, or any area that Congress could focus on to help our Secret Service personnel and help that agency, get to where we need them to be?
I think legislatively, there's probably not a lot that needs to be done, at least in the short term. I would recommend continued oversight. I think that's a very important and healthy thing that we're going to do, because as I said in my testimony, and as we say in our reports, they've made initial good progress. The leader of the Secret Service has embraced the Protective Mission Panel recommendations, has embraced this committee's recommendations to move forward, but we don't know what the future holds. So the only way to be able to continue to hold the Secret Service's feet to the fire is with continued oversight that this committee gives, and hopefully that our office gives as well.
Okay, I believe my time has expired. I just want to thank you all for your contribution to this hearing and to the issues that we're working on here. Thank you again. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank the gentleman. Now recognize the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Mulvaney, for 5 minutes.
I thank the Chairman. Mr. Carroll, I don't know if you've been here before or not. I don't think you've been here since I've been on this committee. But I think you'll learn, especially with myself and my colleague from South Carolina, Mr. Gowdy, one of the things we appreciate is candor. There's really no reason to beat around the bush. Y'all were talking about Jason, Chairman Chaffetz. We get it. That's fine. Okay, you could sit and go back and forth all day saying, well, I don't know who it might be. I could guess, but I won't guess. I mean, in fact, y'all put out a separate press release that actually specifically mentioned the chairman. It said, and I don't know who John Adler is, apparently he's your national president, quote, "The chairman's actions boggle the rational mind. He's turning his committee into the fictional USS Kane as he subpoenas Secret Service law enforcement officers to his ship to count strawberries," end quote. I mean, that's about the chairman. The previous statement's about the chairman. Let's just be honest with each other. It's a much better way to conduct a hearing. So I'll ask you a straight question. Do you think it helps?
No.
So why do you do it?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I've been doing this now for 3 months, Mr. Mulvaney, and in that 3 months I've tried to tighten up our processes and procedures. If you notice in both those cases, and one of the, I guess, a nuance on this thing is it isn't from the Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association, it's from their foundation that those 2 press releases came. And that Mr. Adler had been a president of FLIOLA. He went over to the foundation, which is the charitable arm of our organization. Up until now, anybody who had an officer position had access to our letterhead, press release type information. That's what you're referring to. But I got to tell you,
I hate to cut you off, but I mean, seriously, man, the headline, it says the Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association. That's, again, this is a minor deal, but don't sit there and tell me it's your foundation, not the association. I mean, it's your.
I'm trying to be as candid as I can.
Is this your head? Is this your letterhead?
It's the foundation letterhead, if I'm not mistaken.
No, you are mistaken. It says Federal Law Enforcement Officers
Association. Then maybe it was
Association.
under his watch as the president, which is outside of mine.
Let's get to the thing. I mean, seriously, you're killing me with this. Let's have an honest conversation and not try and Inspector General Roth, here's I think the last question I want to ask about the topic, which is that the punishments. I think one of the things that frustrates us, that frustrates people back home, is that something deplorable did happen, something awful happened, that the Secret Service of the United States of America used private records about a sitting member of Congress to try and make him look bad and undermine his authority. In fact, I think you said something disturbing, which is that there's nothing to prevent that from happening again. So you telling me that today a Secret Service agent who doesn't like Mr. Cummings can go and start looking through your files for material on him. Is that a true statement?
It depends whether Mr. Cummings was either a protectee or an applicant. So obviously the Secret Service doesn't keep records on everyone, but certainly other applicants who would be in, for example, Chairman Chaffetz's situation, those records still are there. They still don't have audit protection. It's unclear as to who has access to those records, and there's certainly no way to detect that.
Will the gentleman yield for one question?
I will.
How did y'all know he was an applicant? How did Secret Service know that Chairman Chaffetz was an applicant?
According to our investigation, someone decided to look it up in MCI. There was a single individual in a field office who just decided to look it up, and from there it sort of spread throughout the Secret Service.
But to Mick's point, if you're going to run Chairman Chaffetz's name, you could run Ranking Member Cummings' name, you could run anyone's name.
Correct, but you may not find a record within the MCI system.
It was only because Chairman Chaffetz respected the Secret Service enough to actually apply.
That's correct.
Okay.
Staying on that, Mr. Roth, one of the things that frustrates us is that the penalties, no one was fired. I think everybody acknowledges that. We've got a report here that says that Homeland Security actually reduced the amount of discipline from an average of 8.5 days to 5.3 days, in part because DHS discovered that mishandling of the information was a common practice. Since when is that an excuse? I mean, you had an assistant director who encouraged the release of this information, but part of the justification for not penalizing that person was that, oh, well, everybody did it. Really, is that the defense, Mr. Doherty? That this was so common that y'all searched Mr. Cummings' records and mine or Mr. Gowdy's, that since everybody did it, it didn't deserve to be punishable?
So, Mr. Mulvaney, first of all, let me correct the record.
Okay,
Secret Service individuals, employees cannot access those records now. They are limited. That's one of the things that we did change over.
Are you disagreeing with Mr. Roth, or are you guys just using different terms for different things?
We're talking about what is in existence now versus what it was when they actually looked at us. But we have, in fact,
Mr. Roth,
this issue.
Yes, no, maybe?
That's certainly not our information at the time we did the audit. When you looked at the 5 different data systems, for example, Chairman Chaffetz's information was in 2 different systems. It was in the personnel system.
When was your audit, Mr. Roth?
I'm sorry?
When was your audit?
I think our field work was done, completed at the beginning of 2016.
Are you saying you fixed it since then, Mr. Doherty?
May I address that, sir?
Let me
Sure.
refer to my colleague here, Mr. Mulvaney.
If it's been fixed, that's a good news, and we can move on.
It's been fixed.
Okay. Mr. Roth, do you mind taking another look at that again?
I can expound upon that if you'd like.
Certainly as part of our audit process, what we do is every 90 days we take a look at what progress they've made, and we'll report on that.
All right. Well, if that's one thing that comes to the hearing, that at least this can't happen again, maybe that's good news. I wish we could talk more about what your agents are going through, all of them, because it sounds like something that would universally frustrate all of us up here. We'd like to help, but unfortunately we've got other stuff to deal with as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. We'll recognize the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Clay, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as we discuss what Congress can do to improve staffing at the Secret Service, we should understand how Congress helped create the crisis in the first place. Last year, the chairman, myself, and all members of this committee approved a bipartisan report that found the Secret Service was experiencing a staffing crisis, and one of the 3 main causes was, quote, significant cuts imposed by the Budget Control Act of 2011, otherwise known as sequestration. Mr. Doherty, you were at the Secret Service when sequestration took effect. Do you recall seeing how that impacted the agency?
Congressman Clay, thank you very much for that question. It was a perfect storm for the Secret Service to find ourselves in that, and it contributed significantly to the rapid decline in our funding and our budgeting for personnel. And frankly, we're still digging our way out of that hole.
Wow. The Secret Service rapidly lost 500 employees between 2011 and 2013. During those 3 years, the committee's report found, quote, Congress approved $165 million less than the combined amount requested by the President for the USSS. Mr. Doherty, do you recall how senior leadership reacted to those budget cuts at the time? and how they handled the shortfall?
I don't recall the exact numbers, but I do recall that the management response was effectively sort of to pick people and programs and sort of just balance it so that protection was not impacted and people were not impacted as little as possible. It was really effectively a very hard choice, and one in which we tried to manage as much as we possibly could. We are also, though, I might add, sort of leaning forward, managing out of it. We are attempting to sort of manage out of it, and funding is, in fact, a very important commodity, a component to this particular issue.
Given the cuts, can you think of a way the Secret Service could have avoided significant decreases in staff?
Would you repeat that question?
Given the cuts that you all, that impacted your agency, do you think, can you think of a way the Secret Service could have avoided significant decreases in staff?
We were in a place where our base funding for our agency was already low. We hit the wall. It was really a place where it was very difficult to sort of manage out of it. It really became a Hobson's choice. Technology, people, programs, the whole like. So it ultimately became a very difficult thing for us to sort of get out. That's why we think that we are sort of starting to kind of move out of that, and why we are hiring at such a rapid pace in order to make up the difference.
So you are now trying to restore that staffing to a respectable level.
Director Clancy has made that the priority of the agency, is to refresh and to bring people back in so that we can give our people our lives back.
You know, one of the 29 recommendations in the committee's bipartisan report was, and I quote, "Congress should ensure that the USSS has sufficient funds to restore staffing to required levels, and USSS should ensure that it has systems in place to achieve these goals. Permanently fixing the pay cap waiver issue should be the first step of many towards fulfilling this recommendation." Mr. Roth or Mr. O'Carroll, would you concur that Congress should ensure sufficient funding for Secret Service staffing? Mr. Carroll first.
Yes, Mr. Clay, we agree completely. Sufficient funding would take care of a lot of the morale issues and the other issues that they're experiencing.
Mr. Roth.
Yes, certainly our findings have shown that this is going to require a sustained long-term commitment of both personnel and funds.
And Mr. Doherty, has the Secret Service evaluated what levels of funding would be sufficient to restore staffing appropriately?
We have, Congressman Clay, and in whether it's the Strategic Human Capital Plan that we submitted to Capitol Hill last June, or the various sort of other additional budgets that we've done, or the discussions we've had with committee staff with respect to our quarterly evaluations, we continue to raise the issue about additional funding in order to pay for a mission-based budgeting process.
And it's evident that Congress cannot slash the budget of the Secret Service without expecting serious consequences. And, Mr. Chair, my time is up.
Thank you. I'll now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Doherty, what do you believe Congress does not have a right to see?
I have full respect for the oversight and the constitutional duties of the Congress with respect to that. So I'm not sure exactly.
Is there anything that you believe the Congress should not be able to see?
I believe that when we're going through a process of trying to figure out records, how we all can accommodate each other's sort of interests in making sure that Congress is able to do their oversight job fully, completely, and unhindered, and at the same time recognize to some extent some of the considerations, the interests that we have as an agency, particularly since we owe our people some privacy.
Would the gentleman
from South Carolina.
Would you agree Congress created the whole Inspector General apparatus? That's not constitutional in nature. It's statutory, right?
I would agree that Congress not only established the IG, they established the United States Secret Service in 1865.
All right. Good point. We did both. So Congress they wanted to, could do away with all the Inspector General's next appropriations process. If they wanted to, they don't, but they could, right?
I understand.
So why would Congress have to wait until an Inspector General concludes an investigation before Congress can get in line to gain access to information?
What information are we talking about?
Any information.
Yeah, Howdy.
It is routine for people to sit at that table and say, we cannot cooperate with an ongoing congressional investigation because there's an ongoing Inspector General investigation. It is routine for that to come from witnesses at that table.
The information under both the February 2015 letter and the June 2015 subpoena has been substantially complied with, but for one, document production, and also the ultimate issue
What
of
is your,
names.
why not complete production under the subpoena as opposed to substantial? Why do you get to make that determination?
I'm not making that determination. What I'm saying is basically
The Secret
that
Service, has the Secret Service fully complied with the duly issued subpoena from Congress?
we continue to owe you materials. We have been doing.
When are we going to get it?
Production. Well, first of all, it's been the committee that basically inserted additional document requests that they prioritized over this.
It was issued in June, I believe.
It was issued February and June, yes.
Okay, so why have you not fully complied with it?
It's tens of thousands of documents. We are relatively one document production
No,
away.
you are taking extra time and work. I'll give you an example here. In this particular document, just on page 4 alone, there's 21 redactions.
I don't know which document you're referring to, Chairman.
All right. We tried to do this. This is the Bartlett file. Why do we get redacted documents?
I have not seen that document, so I can't refer to that document.
Go ahead.
Specifically.
I'll show you a copy of it.
What I'm
Deliver it to
saying,
him.
Chairman, is
Why should I get any redacted documents? To my original question, what is it that Congress should not be able to see?
so even on Wednesday and Thursday of last week, I was sitting down with committee staff to try and resolve this issue.
You don't want to go there. Mr. Doherty, you do not want to go there. I want the documents. We have a duly issued subpoena, and I expect you to fulfill it without redactions. If you think there's a justification for redaction, tell me now.
So the anonymous document, the anonymized document that we gave you, which lays out sort of all the various sort of categories of information about these particular files, and we gave that to you yesterday. We thought that that would help you be able to sort of parse out and target what particular files you particularly want to discuss in more fully in an informed way.
You are making decisions that you should not make. When I issue a subpoena, you should fully comply with it. It's not optional. You don't get to parse it out and hide things. When you have 79% of the Secret Service saying that your senior-most leadership is not honest and trustworthy, we have a problem. Then we're going to go peek under the hood. When you have more than 10% of your level 15, GS 15 and above, who have problematic backgrounds in that they've had to go through investigations of themselves since they've been agents, you have a problem. When you hand us a document with nearly 30 people and only one of them says it's unsubstantiated, we have a problem. When you have Cartagena happen, and there are 8 incidents since Cartagena, and then they continue to get promoted, at least I think it's 5 of them continue to get promoted, we have a problem. We get to do an investigation. So to my original question, what is it you think Congress has no right to see?
Chairman, we're trying to basically sort of lean forward. And I'm looking at the
My simple question is, are you or are you not going to comply with the subpoena?
and that is why we were having a discussion with staff.
I don't want to have a discussion anymore. We've been talking about it for nearly a year. I want the documents. Are you or are you not going to provide them?
And there was discussion on the table in which to accommodate that. But the list that we gave you.
You really want to have you want to talk about the discussion that you proposed?
Would the Chairman yield for a moment?
Yes.
Just humor me and give me an idea of what those discussions would be about. What privilege are you asserting that would prevent you from making information available to the entity that created your department, your agency?
So I'm not standing here in a position as an attorney here because I've not served in that role at the Secret Service in the very
Well, that's
long time,
okay.
since 2003.
You don't have to be an attorney to know why you're not turning stuff over.
I'm not asserting a privilege, Mr. Gowdy.
Well, if it's not a
What I'm effectively
privilege,
doing is having a practical discussion about the information that furthers and advances the committee's oversight.
all right,
And effectively bringing us
but I
to
want
positive.
I want you to hear those words from our standpoint. Let me tell you what I hear when I hear you say that. We're going to decide what we think you need.
And that's not.
So, but that's what you just said, that advances the committee's work. We may get to decide what advances our work. Would you give redacted documents if it were a grand jury subpoena or a court subpoena? If that branch of government sought documents, would you go through and redact them before you gave them to a judge?
I think that's a good example, but I'll take a different example. That is in terms of normal discovery. Oftentimes, courts will say, we're just generally decide.
Please tell
what
me you are
documents.
not treating Congress like a criminal
I am-
defense attorney. I am begging you to please tell me that's not what
I'm
you're
not,
doing.
Mr. Gowdy, what I'm saying is basically the discussions that we had as late as last week, I thought were going towards a creative resolution to this particular issue, what ultimately was going to give the committee the place where they wanted to be on this.
Well,
And I think
but
if
what
we had
I hear
more
the
time, we
chairman
would have been able to get
saying,
there.
what I hear the chairman saying is the place he wants to be is exactly what he asked for. Hence, there really is no more need for negotiation unless you have a legal privilege or some constitutional precept you are standing on to not allow the branch that created your agency to see documents. Then what is the discussion about?
The discussion is about ultimately what is fair to individuals as well. Look, if you have a child come home and basically they do a fender bender, you basically sort of put them on timeout or whatever, and then you ultimately give them the keys back. This is exactly the same situation. We have individuals who have engaged in misconduct, but it doesn't mean necessarily that's the end of their career. They basically continue to go forward, just like we treat our children.
Well,
that's basically what we're talking about.
Don't you think the father of three would be able to appreciate that analogy? Then why can't you give us the documents and then make the analogy?
Let me recognize the ranking member, Mr.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we don't keep, it seems like we're going in a little circle here. I want to get us off from the circle. Who makes the decisions with regard to the redactions? We're all concerned about Congress being able to do its job. And to do its job, we need information. But who makes, when you said you're not a lawyer, I know a lot of people have a lot of against lawyers, but we have been provided with special skills and information that a lot of people don't have. So you're not a lawyer, is that right?
I'm a lawyer.
You are?
I am, yes.
Okay. And so tell me, who makes these decisions with regard to the redactions?
It's a combination of decision with.
Do you make them?
I do not. And that's not the role that I've played in, sir. I actually came here to talk about PMP and the Hoger Committee report and not this, because this is an area that I've not been involved in up till now. I don't play an official role in this. Played an official role in building up the new integrity system and the new table of penalties, but not the old disciplinary system that we had before.
So who can we talk to get you don't sound like you're the right person to be asking these questions. Who should we talk to get the answers to the question?
This is a joint decision.
This is legal counsel for the Secret Service and legal counsel for DHS?
Legal plays a very large role in the decision-making, yes, sir.
All right, I got to conclude here with this line of questioning here to tell you how highly offensive it is to you comparing this to a fender bender, okay? When you have 79% of your employees saying they don't believe that the senior management is acting honestly, don't tell me it's some fender bender. This so-called employee number 5, an SES-level employee, transmitted hardcore pornography materials along with racially charged and sexist conduct, and yet he only received a written reprimand. You have another. Here's an email I'm gonna read to you as best I can, and sorry for the nature of this. This is subject, a very talented woman. And remember, this is on government computers between employees. Now this uses the B word, has some talent. Careful where you open this definitely adult material. And then it goes on. But you've redacted all of this. I can't tell if you're actually taking the appropriate disciplinary process. And don't tell me this is some innocent fender bender where we didn't take away the keys the right way. Get serious, Mr. Doherty. This is serious stuff. And if we can't trust the senior-most people in the Secret Service, you're right. They're going to have to lose their keys to the kingdom. And I don't think you're taking the appropriate disciplinary action, but I want to find out. I want to know. I want to look at those files. And guess what? That's the way the Congress is set up. And when you have more than 10% of your SES employees, 15 and above, that fall into this category, you have a very serious problem. I could go on and on about the serious nature, and when you send me a spreadsheet with 30, and none of them only one of them says it's unsubstantiated, we have the right and the duty and the obligation to look at it. That's what oversight is all about. This committee was formed in 1814. Abraham Lincoln served on this committee, for goodness sake. So unless you have some legal authority, you are putting us in a position that nobody wants to be in. We don't want to have to hold you in contempt. You should cooperate. And of all the things out there, Homeland Security, Secret Service should know, you wouldn't put up with this if you were investigating somebody else and you had a subpoena and you served it on them and they said, give me a moment, I got to cross out a few things because I just want to make it fair. I just want to cross these things out so that, you know, I want to make sure that you get what you need. Are you kidding me? That is not the way this process works. You have a duly issued subpoena. I expect you to comply with it. When will you give me an answer as to whether or not you're going to comply with the subpoena in its totality? Not a negotiation, in its totality. When will I have that answer?
Chairman Chaffetz, I'm not in a position to tell you that.
You knew this question was coming. We told you in advance it's coming. When is it reasonable for me to have an answer to this question?
I think we are working very hard on that at the latter part of last week, and hopefully we can get to a place.
Give me a date.
I cannot give you a date, Chairman Chaffetz. I'm not the decision maker here. But I think
Who's the going back to what Mr. Cummings says, give me specific names. Who advised you on this question? Who?
Well, it's ultimately.
No, I want to know specifically who did you have a discussion about this with? You're under oath. Give me the answer.
With respect to multiple individuals.
Go ahead. List them out. I got time. Go ahead.
Director Clancy, a number of other individuals.
No, name the individuals. You're a smart man. You know these people's names. Name them.
The gentleman directly behind me, Mr. Paramore, our counsel, Donna Cahill. Those are the individuals.
Those three. Nobody else.
That's what I recall.
Any other? I'm giving you one more chance. Anybody else advise you on how to?
Do not recall, Chairman.
Okay.
This has been a multi-pronged discussion, and I've had multi-pronged discussions with your staff on this issue to try and sort of find a way forward.
Yeah. It's not acceptable. We shouldn't have to wait this long. We're trying to do our jobs, and we're trying to help you to do your jobs. But it requires cooperation. And when I have to get to the point where I have to issue a subpoena, I expect compliance, 100% compliance. Understood?
Understood.
We'll now recognize We'll now recognize the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Grothman, for 5 minutes.
Yeah, kind of disturbing testimony. I think we can kind of see why 79% say leadership is not honest and trustworthy. But in any event, question for Mr. Roth. Before the topic of compensation came up, what is the base compensation for the different Secret Service levels or officers?
I would not have that information.
Does Mr. O'Carroll have that information?
No, Mr. Grothman.
Nobody. Does any of the other guys have that information?
That's on the OPM sort of general schedule website. Basically, you can find it there, and we could certainly provide that.
Do you have any idea what people make? Like if I'm a Secret Service agent for 15 years, what am I making? Nobody knows?
Approximately $145,000 base pay.
Okay.
A lot of hours for a little bit of pay.
Okay. And so if a Secret Service, are they getting overtime then above that?
They are for protection.
Okay. So if I work 41 hours a week, I'm getting more than $145,000?
They would receive overtime for protection. They also receive leave pay, which effectively is law enforcement availability pay. That's an additional 2 hours, but that's beyond overtime.
I guess there's some feeling that we're not paying enough here, and maybe I'll ask Mr. O'Carroll. I mean, to me, these are professional jobs, right? Don't you think they're kind of professional
Yes,
jobs?
sir.
I mean, to me, anywhere in the world, if you're making 145 grand, that's not a 40-hour-a-week job, right? If I'm making 145 grand, I expect to, I don't know, 45, 50, 55 hours a week, right? Wouldn't you
Agreed.
think?
But as you noticed from my testimony at the beginning is most of the agents in a campaign year are working 16-hour days, so they are putting more than a 40-hour work week.
I know, but the question is, and I would think this is particularly if you're doing the presidential or presidential candidate detail, almost an honor. I guess it surprises me that if you're making 145 grand a year, that on your compensation, if you're working 45 hours a week, you're expecting overtime. See what I'm saying? I mean, normally, you know, people who work for me, my chief of staff, my deputy chief of staff, I mean, they're not making that much, but they work more than 40 hours a week. I work well over 40 hours a week but they pay us pretty well for that. I just am a little bit surprised that as a Secret Service agent, if you're working 45 hours a week, you think that's overtime or additional pay. You think that's right?
Well, a couple of things on it, just for clarification. One, they are getting paid for some of that overtime with that law enforcement availability pay. So yes, as we said, that above that $140,000, there would be some overtime that's automatically included. And what we were bringing up, or one of our concerns of our members, is that it's capping out at the 15 step 10 level, which is about $160,000. So technically, any agent after that with the caps on it are working for free, and that was my concern.
Right.
So
Well,
again, we're kind of dealing with that 15 grand
You've got up
zone
around
there.
150. You're expected to work more. I mean, that's what well-paid people do.
Yeah.
Now, just a general question for Mr. Doherty. That 79% say leadership is not honest and trustworthy. You want to comment on that? Why do you think people are answering the questionnaire that way? Why do you think that your agents think you're not honest and trustworthy to that degree? I mean, that's just stunning. Could you give me an opinion as to what's going on in their mind, in your opinion?
I'm not sure when that particular survey or number was established. Do recognize that we have had multiple surveys and other things that basically sort of go to the issue of confidence in leadership. I do think, though, that the change of leadership with Director Clancy, and keeping in mind that he changed every single assistant director but for one individual, and also to recreated the agency, that there has been substantial changes in terms of that and the kinds of things that we're trying to respond to.
Why do you think in the past such a high percentage thought leadership was so bad? What bad things were they doing?
Well, I think that, first of all, the old disciplinary process that we had basically contributed to that, because effectively it was not very transparent, it wasn't consistent, and it wasn't fair. It had different decision makers basically making those decisions.
I'll cut you off. I'll ask the same question to Mr. Roth. I'm almost out of my time.
It's difficult to know. Certainly those questions, the answers to those questions have been consistent over time. One of the things that we talk about when we talk about an ethical culture is to have a tone at the top, the right kind of a tone at the top, having systems in place to enforce that culture, and then actually doing something about it. So in relation, for example, to the discipline that was imposed on the individuals that accessed, in violation of the Privacy Act, Chairman Chaffetz's records, I think that discipline was inadequate, and I think it's perceived of as a dual standard.
Okay. I'll just well, in my life, I'm trying to go back in my life, all the bosses I've had, if I ever felt anybody was untrustworthy and not honest, and I really can't think of any of my bosses I felt that way about. So when you have that many think that poorly about the people who run the Secret Service, it's kind of scary. But I've run out of my time, so thank you.
Thank the gentleman. We'll now recognize the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Conley, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Great to be back. Mr. Roth, why does anybody in the Secret Service need overtime?
We haven't looked at that, Congressman. I'm not sure what you're getting at. It's not part of our audit reports.
Well, I mean, if you had a full workforce with fully staffed shifts, you'd, in theory, ideally, you'd never need overtime. Isn't that correct?
Understood, correct. There had not been a staffing plan that had been established previous to just recently. So essentially, the Secret Service was understaffed, forcing people to work overtime, eliminating training that was necessary for them to do their jobs.
Okay.
So that's why they needed the overtime.
And how pervasive of a problem is that? That understaffing that requires more and more overtime?
It is significant. As we talk about when we looked at the PMP report, certainly in 2015 they had 6,350 people on board. The estimate was that they needed 7,600 people on board, so about 1,300 more individuals to have the kind of staffing that would minimize, although not eliminate overtime, because that's the nature of law enforcement, that there's always overtime, but also allow for adequate training.
So the fact that if we'll stipulate your numbers, we're 1,300 understaffed, that's a lot. That's about 20-something% of the ideal workforce, right?
Correct. And again, what I'm talking about is numbers from 2015.
No, I understand.
It's gone up since.
Right.
But yes, it is significant.
So the Secret Service has to fall back on overtime if it's going to carry out its duties.
Precisely.
And if it doesn't do that, if it actually just keeps people to their shift, no overtime, what's the risk?
Well, obviously, it's a risk of mission failure.
And does that put lives in jeopardy, potentially?
It absolutely does.
Because this isn't just any mission.
That's correct.
And, of course, in an election year, the demands on the Secret Service are that much greater.
Correct.
Especially this one, maybe. That's my editorial comment. You don't have to comment. All right. So Congress certainly has recognized this problem, right, and rushed to fill in the gap and to make sure that you had either the overtime you need and or the staffing you need so that this sacred mission is not compromised and nobody's at risk. Is that not what's happened, Mr. Doherty?
Well, Congressman Connolly, first of all, if I can at least observe that the law provides for the payment of overtime for Secret Service agents as well as other law enforcement. Really, the issue that we're talking about just simply is the cap to the law that Congress has established relative to payment or compensation for law enforcement. Having said that, I totally agree with you, though, that really the resolution to the problem, of course, trying to make sure that the service can continue to do its mission, is both funding and also to the law. Sort of a recognition that at least that we have a unique mission, which requires an awful lot of hours by individuals to sort of continue to do what they're doing.
Yes, Mr. Doherty, my time's running out, and I was going to get to the point you brought up, but thank you for bringing it up. So this pay cap Congress has imposed, is that correct?
I don't, actually, I think we are excited at the idea that the committee effectively has sponsored legislation.
Not my question, Mr. Doherty. Is there a pay cap or not on overtime absent other legislative action?
You are correct, sir.
Yes. And does that pay cap in any way affect performance or morale of Secret Service agents who are doing their duty and putting in the overtime, whether they're getting paid, whether there's a pay cap or not? Is that not correct?
I think that's the nub of the question.
Yeah.
And I believe, sir, that the answer is yes, that when you ask individuals, it's one thing to ask an individual to go and do their job. It's another thing, though, to say, do your job, and by the way, at this point in time in your work week, you're not getting compensated any further. I believe that this is simply an unintended consequence to the way that Congress sort of struck the ceiling or the cap, not taking into consideration the specialized missions that certain organizations have. And the Secret Service, I think, is a unique one with respect to that, particularly given the recurring sort of nature of the campaign. Every 4 years we kind of run into this. This was not a problem that just existed in 2016. It has been a problem that's been in existence going back to multiple campaigns.
Yes, I take your point, and my time's up, but I would simply say we hear a lot about, you know, we got to run government like a business. I don't know any business that would say to its employees, we're going to set, you know, virtually limitless hours for you to work, and we're only going to compensate you for part of that. And I just think we in Congress have a responsibility to revisit that issue and address it in a responsible way so that the Secret Service is adequately compensated and your mission is successful. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Thank the gentleman. We'll recognize the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Palmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Doherty, are you aware that in the list of best places to work in the federal government in 2015, that Secret Service ranks 319th out of 320?
I'm aware of that.
Did it ever occur to you that there might be a connection between the fact that 79% of the rank and file that work for the Secret Service, the men and women in uniform and in the protective detail, that might have something to do with that low ranking?
That ranking is connected to a lot of things that we didn't have.
Well, I can assure you that when 79% don't trust leadership, it's going to be reflected in your ranking. And I'm sitting here listening to this and listening to you guys talk about the overtime. And we had a hearing back in March of 2015, and it turns out that in that hearing we found out that the uniformed officers were now getting only like 25 minutes of training, and that your protection detail has previously been spending 25% of their on-duty time and training. It's now down to 2%. And then you're working these hours, I think Mr. Thomas Pirelli in a February hearing indicated maybe 58 hours. So you're working these people, and then you're providing them, in my opinion, untrustworthy leadership. And I just want to bring up something here, and going back to Mr. Gowdy's questions. Mr. Assistant Director Edward Lowry, he was recently promoted to that. Does he have a misconduct citation in his record?
Again, I serve as the Chief Strategy Officer for the Secret Service. I'm not involved in the disciplinary process.
I'm not asking you if you were involved in this one. I'm asking you a direct question. It's a yes or no. Or you can say you don't know.
I don't know.
Okay. You know, he's the one who sent out an email that said that there some information might be that he might find embarrassing that needs to get out. The he was referring to is Mr. Chavitz, Chairman Chavitz. There's 10 new assistant directors that have been promoted. I've got a list here, 41 alleged misconduct or people charged with misconduct. How many of the 10 new assistant directors do you think might be on this list? And could you answer that for me?
I cannot.
Could you find out and let us know?
Yes.
I'd appreciate that. Would you also let us know if Mr. Lowry is one of those?
Yes.
Nod in your head, I take as an affirmative. Thank you. I'd also like to point out that this appears to be problematic in the Department of Homeland Security, because among the large agencies, Homeland Security ranks last, and they rank last in 2014 and 2015. And I just think this is indicative, Mr. Chairman, of a major issue with management. And again, going back to the fact that 79% say that they find management not, that they're not honest and not trustworthy, makes it look like management's more interested in protecting management than they are looking out for the men and women who are putting their lives on the line. And you're wearing them out. And I can tell you as a former athlete that and particularly in football, that you got in the fourth quarter, fatigue would make a difference. I don't care. And you've reduced their training down to such low levels that you combine that with fatigue, and you're looking for a disaster. And then on top of that, you operate the agency in such a way that really is reprehensible. I've heard that word used once before. I mean, what are you going to do? Are you going to continue to protect management? Are you going to continue to deny the committee the documents that we've requested? Because our objective is not necessarily to get anyone. Our objective is to restore the credibility and reputation of the Secret Service so that the men and women who serve the Secret Service can do their job, can get paid what they should get paid and can get home safe. Is that too much to ask?
I appreciate the sports analogy because I use them all the time. Frankly, that's why we're coming here and doing the quarterly updates, to show you the things that we're doing. And yes, we have been talking to the committee to basically sort of resolve this ultimate issue about the records.
But the chairman's pointed out that we've made multiple requests. We've subpoenaed documents that we think are important to getting the Secret Service back to the level of expertise and credibility that they've enjoyed for their entire existence. But you've denied us those documents. We've got cases here where there's misconduct that's gone really unpunished. And if you want to restore your rank and file's confidence in the agency, you need to work with us. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. We'll recognize myself for a series of questions as we conclude this hearing. Inspector General Roth thought we were roughly 1,300 people short of where we need to be right now. Mr. Doherty, is that your understanding? Is 1,300 how many we're short?
I'm not following exactly where he gets the number 1,300. I could tell you sort of what we plotted out through our strategic human capital plan effectively. If you're going to get ourselves back to the 7,024, or you're going to get us to the number 8,300, effective, and we plotted out all those numbers. We have tried to assess through new models for personnel where we think we ought to be.
And I appreciate that, and we want you to share that in its totality with the committee. What I'm trying to understand is how far short of those goals as you plot it moving forward, much to what Mr. Lynch put up on the chart, which was part of our graph. How far short are we? And if you can't answer right off the cuff,
I can't answer right off, but I would be glad to provide that information, that number to you. I think it does no tie, though, to the plan that we have given to the Congress in June of 2015, and we continue to update our strategic human capital plan. And we're having our models revalidated by an outside contractor to make sure that we are in the right place on that as well.
Okay. It is something of keen interest. Mr. Cummings referred to it. So many of us have referred to it, is how many we're short. I liken this into a bathtub. You know, you try to keep filling it up in the top, but the drain at the bottom, the attrition is so great. And until you get ahead of that curve, you can't get people with reasonable lives. We want them to have a personal life. We want them to be able to do these things, and we recognize the surge that happens during a presidential campaign. But what we also see is that, according to the numbers you've given us, agents only spend about 1/3 of their time on a protective-related activities during non-presidential years, and just barely over half their time during presidential years. So if you're spending 50% to 2/3 of their time on activities outside of the protective mission, it does beg the question that I will continue to pursue, which is, should we shed off all the things that you're supposed to be doing as it relates to cyber and cyber defenses? Because look at the irony here. We're hearing reports from the Inspector General. You don't even have the basic systems in place to deal with some of the most basic things we have. Mr. Nally, you said something, said, quote, all this has been rectified. I want to give you a chance to help clarify that, because I have pictures of your office where somebody emails in their application, it's printed out, it's stacked up in the hallway, not in a secure setting. It's behind a locked door, but certainly not in a secure setting. And then you retype it in? How arcane, how bad is the personnel system, both in terms of hiring and tracking current employees? Are you where you want to be?
I'll never be, excuse me. Mr. Chairman, I'll never be where I want to be.
Okay, where are you at now? I mean, okay, great. That's a philosophical thing. But where are you at? If I pulled out somebody's name, I pulled out Jane Doe out of the file, and I said, show me employee number 1,233, could you tell me how many hours she's worked? No, I want to ask Mr. Nally. He's the CIO. Could you tell me that?
I don't know because I don't have access to that system. And that's one of the
Can the
things.
system pull up that information? Does the system track personnel's hours worked?
Chairman Chaffetz, I run that part of the Secret
Okay,
Service.
go ahead.
The answer is yes. We have, and we've provided to the committee staff our annual performance statistics. I'll be glad to provide them again.
But can you buy the personnel? If I took a random sampling, if Mr. Roth came in here and took a random sample of the personnel, could he tell me that Jane Doe it worked this many hours?
I believe that we can, and I believe that we've...
Okay, Mr. Roth, is that something you can do in short order? Can we take a random sampling and track these employees? I mean, when you get an SES employee or a GS 15 employee, can you track that?
We don't know. I'd have to check with my folks to see.
Okay, so here's the
that's
problem.
doable.
I've sponsored a bill to loosen up $22 million to pay people for the overtime they worked in just 2016. But I need some assurance that you're not just going to hand this out like candy and say, well, you get, $20,000 and you get $15,000 unless there's some real metrics and some documentation that shows that this person worked 43 straight days at 13 hours a day.
I know I can provide that data, and I can provide that assurance as to who's getting overtime and when they're getting it and how they're going to get it. Ultimately.
Okay.
Again, we have those performance metrics. If we do anything right, we do a really good job of that as sort of understanding. Besides, we pay these people, and we have to have an understanding as to the hours that they worked. So I do think that we're in the right place on this. I'll be glad to provide any information to you to satisfy.
Is there a scheduling system in place now so people can see where, and granted, protectees change where they're going to be at a moment's notice, and I get that. But can agents have visibility on when they're projected to work over, say, the next 7 days?
So that's a... Go ahead.
Go ahead, excuse me. Mr. Chairman, we have a system that will be IOC, Initial Operational Capable. It's called UD, Uniform Division / RMS, Resource Management System, that will be IOC the first week in December. It's a modernized program that's taking the current scheduling system and automating it. For example, the agents and UD officers do have an application on their phone that we currently issue them and they use, where they can put in for leave or, say, sick day off, et cetera. That's an automated process. Come the first week in December, they're going to be able to have laid out a scheduling system for those officers. It's automated. It's an agile approach that we're using. We have UD officers involved in the process. And currently this week, out at the RTC, we have user verification testing on that system.
Mr. Roth, I just would like agents, officers, they need to be able to know when they're going to work. We heard this horror story last time. It was Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and they didn't know if they were working on Thanksgiving and what time. They say, I'm happy to work on Thanksgiving. Just tell me if I've got to have breakfast with my family or dinner with my family. I can't see it. And I want to make sure that that is solved. Mr. Doherty, do we have enough personnel? Do you need any assistance to help with the inauguration?
So, and I think you've seen the model or heard of the model before. The model for NSSEs is a really well-developed model for the Secret Service. And that model has been, here as we speak, has been already implemented.
Okay, all I'm asking on that topic, I just want the Inspector General to go in and look at it and report back and tell us what he's found.
And we are collaborating.
Okay, that's all.
Everybody that we need in order to.
I don't even need an answer for you on that. I want the Inspector General to find out if that part is working.
Thank you, sir.
The application portion of it, the tracking of overtime, and the projection on when they're going to work in the future. It's sort of the beginning, the middle, and the end. I just want him to come back to us and share with us his findings. Do you have enough personnel, or do you need any assistance to successfully get us through this inauguration?
Our normal model basically is to go and collaborate with as many people that we have to, whether it's state and local, other federal law enforcement, DHS, of course. So I think the answer is yes, the model is there and the plan will be there.
And to the Inspector General, the other thing I would like to get at is, again, we've highlighted this, but we're going to continue to highlight this. I do believe there's a very significant attrition problem These are good, high-paying jobs. Don't get me wrong here, but the amount of overtime is so excessive. We have to get to a point, and keep in mind the imperative here. It is amazing what they've done and what they will do. And this is where I want to conclude with the same thing we started with. We cannot thank them enough, the men and women who are actually out there on the front lines doing this day in and day out. And I can't imagine whether I was single or married or whatever, I had a loved one or just a mom and dad who cared about me or just somebody who's out there by themselves, looking at the calendar ahead and thinking, gosh, you know what, I got another 15 days in this month and I'm not going to get paid a dime. And continuing to do that. That's how dedicated these men and women are. I want to help solve that by loosening up $22 million so that we can give relief to almost everybody. But the long-term way to solve this is to get to the proper staffing levels. They'll do it. They'll work 15 hours a day. But you know what? When you're working 43 days straight, as the one example, and you're pulling 12, 14-hour shifts, and you're sleeping in a different bed every night because the candidate's traveling all over the country, or and right now President Obama is often in Greece and traveling around the world. We need them to be able to do that, but you don't want an agent who's exhausted and tired and can't figure out how they're going to pay for the child care, and because they're not even getting compensated, and they're not there to help fix the door or the toilet or whatever it might be. We have to get to the proper staffing levels, and we want to help there. Mr. Nally, rather than saying all this has been rectified and that you will never be satisfied, all laudable things, two just bits of words of advice. Be honest and candid in terms of your assessment of your capabilities, and number two, you need to share with us what you're trying to do and what impediments are in the way. The other thing I would lastly suggest is it doesn't need to be all reinvented by yourselves. That's a large federal government. You're not the first one to run into a staffing shortage. The Office of Personnel Management should be the ones to help agencies and departments figure this out. I worry that every time we look around, somebody's got to come up with their own staffing software, And law enforcement is different than how they're going to do it at the Bureau of Land Management. I get that. But please, let's be smart in this and let's solve this problem. Give these people some relief so they're fresh, they're satisfied, they're fully compensated. I thank you all for your expertise and your dedication and your patriotism. We have to get this mission right, and that's the spirit in which we have this hearing. So I thank you all for being here today. The committee stands adjourned.